You're running a database in the cloud. The database crashes. Who's responsible for fixing it? You or your cloud provider? Well, it depends. Is it a managed database service where the provider handles the database engine? Or is it a database you installed yourself on a virtual machine? Did it crash because of infrastructure failure or because of a query you ran? Did you configure high availability, or was that the provider's responsibility? These questions all come down to one critical concept: responsibility boundaries. These are the exact lines that separate what the cloud provider manages from what you manage. And if you don't know where these boundaries are for your specific services, you're setting yourself up for security gaps, operational failures, and finger-pointing when things go wrong. Let's explore how to identify and work with responsibility boundaries in cloud computing. A responsibility boundary is the dividing line between cloud provider responsibilities and customer responsibilities. It's not a suggestion or a guideline. It's a contractual and operational reality that determines who is accountable for what. Think of it like property lines between neighboring houses. On one side of the fence, the neighbor maintains the lawn. On your side, you do. The fence is the boundary, and it's clear who handles what. Responsibility boundaries in cloud computing serve the same purpose. They clearly delineate ownership. But unlike a physical fence, these boundaries aren't always obvious, and they shift depending on what cloud service you're using. The boundary for a virtual machine is in a different place than the boundary for a managed database service, which is different from the boundary for a SaaS application. Here's why these boundaries matter. Gaps in responsibility lead to security vulnerabilities. If you think the provider is patching something they're not, it doesn't get patched. If the provider thinks you're monitoring something you're not, it doesn't get monitored. Overlaps in responsibility lead to wasted effort and confusion. Both understanding and respecting these boundaries is essential for successful cloud operations. The clearest way to understand responsibility boundaries is to look at where they fall in different service models. In infrastructure as a service, the boundary sits at the hypervisor level. The provider manages everything below: physical servers, storage systems, networking hardware, the data center itself, and the virtualization layer. You manage everything above: the guest operating system, middleware, applications, and data. Concretely, this means the provider ensures the physical server is powered, cooled, and connected to the network. But you're responsible for patching the Windows or Linux OS running on your virtual machine. The provider manages the physical storage system. You manage what files you put on the virtual disk and whether you encrypt them. In platform as a service, the boundary moves higher. The provider now manages the infrastructure and the platform layer: operating system, runtime, middleware. Your boundary starts at the application level. You're responsible for your code, your data, and configuration choices about how your application behaves. For example, with a PaaS database service like Amazon RDS, the provider manages the database software, performs automated backups, handles patching, and provides high availability options. Your boundary begins with the database schema, the queries you run, the data you store, and whether you enable encryption. In software as a service, the boundary is at its highest point. The provider manages infrastructure, platform, and application. Your responsibility boundary encompasses only configuration, access management, and your data. You're not managing servers, platforms, or application code, just how you use the fully managed service. The pattern is clear. As you move up the service stack from IaaS to PaaS to SaaS, the responsibility boundary shifts higher and the provider takes on more management duties. Your operational burden decreases, but your responsibility for proper configuration and data management remains constant. Now let's talk about the complicated part. Not all responsibility boundaries are clean, sharp lines. Some areas have overlapping concerns where both parties have responsibilities. Security is the classic grey area. The provider is responsible for security of the cloud, securing the infrastructure. You're responsible for security in the cloud, securing your workloads. But there's overlap. Both parties need to implement security controls, both need to monitor for threats, both need incident response capabilities. The boundary exists, but security is a shared concern that requires coordination. Compliance is similar. The provider can achieve compliance certifications for their infrastructure, but whether your use of that infrastructure is compliant is your responsibility. The provider gives you the tools and compliant infrastructure. You must use them in compliant ways. It's a boundary with interdependence. Performance is another overlapping area. The provider is responsible for infrastructure performance, ensuring adequate compute, storage, and network capacity. You're responsible for application performance, writing efficient code, designing scalable architectures, properly sizing your resources. Poor performance could be either party's fault, making it tricky to diagnose. Data backup illustrates the nuance well. In IaaS, you're responsible for configuring and managing backups entirely. In PaaS database services, the provider performs automated backups, but you're responsible for retention settings, testing restores, and potentially configuring cross-region backup copies. The boundary exists, but there's shared involvement. These grey areas don't eliminate the boundary. They just require you to understand both sides of the responsibility and ensure both are being handled properly. Let's make this concrete with specific examples that show exactly where boundaries fall in practice. Example 1. Network security. The provider is responsible for the physical network infrastructure and protecting it from external attacks at the infrastructure level. You're responsible for configuring virtual network security, security groups, network ACLs, firewall rules, network segmentation. The boundary is clear: physical network versus virtual network configuration. Example 2. Encryption. The provider is responsible for offering encryption capabilities and managing the encryption infrastructure. You're responsible for deciding what to encrypt, enabling encryption on your resources, and managing encryption keys if you use customer-managed keys. The boundary: capability provision versus usage decision. Example 3. Identity and access management. The provider builds and maintains the IAM system, ensures it's available and secure, and protects it from unauthorized access. You're responsible for creating users, assigning permissions, enforcing authentication policies, and managing the lifecycle of identities. The boundary: system provision versus system use. Example 4. Disaster recovery. The provider ensures infrastructure resilience, multiple availability zones, regional redundancy, data center failover capabilities. You're responsible for architecting your applications to use these features, implementing backup strategies, testing disaster recovery procedures, and defining recovery objectives. The boundary: infrastructure capability versus implementation and use. Example 5. Logging and monitoring. The provider generates logs from their infrastructure and services, makes them available to you, and ensures log collection systems are reliable. You're responsible for enabling logging on your resources, defining what to log, analyzing logs, setting up alerts, and responding to what the logs reveal. The boundary: log generation versus log utilization. So how do you effectively work with these boundaries? First, document them explicitly. For every service you use, document where the responsibility boundary sits. Don't assume everyone on your team understands it the same way. Make it explicit. Second, implement controls on your side of the boundary. The provider will handle theirs. Ensure you're handling yours. If the boundary puts OS patching on your side, have a patch management process. If encryption decisions are your responsibility, have an encryption policy. Third, use provider documentation. AWS, Azure, Google Cloud all publish detailed shared responsibility matrices showing exact boundaries for each service. Reference these documents when making decisions. Fourth, communicate across the boundary. When issues arise that might involve the provider, understand what information they need from you and what information you need from them. The boundary doesn't mean you never communicate. It means you each own specific parts. And finally, audit the boundary periodically. As you adopt new services, as providers change their offerings, boundaries can shift. Regularly review your understanding to ensure it's current. Responsibility boundaries in cloud computing define where the provider's job ends and yours begins. They shift based on service models. They have grey areas, but they're always there. Understanding these boundaries isn't just about avoiding blame when things go wrong, it's about ensuring nothing falls through the cracks because both sides thought the other was handling it. If this clarified cloud responsibility boundaries, subscribe for more cloud fundamentals, comment with questions about specific services, and remember, the boundary exists whether you understand it or not, so you might as well understand it. See you in the next one.